Broadcasting from Singapore and broadcasting all around the world. You're listening to the Ignite EdTech Podcast with Craig Kemp, created by an educator for educators and streaming to the world. Now, over to your host, Craig Kemp.
Hello and welcome to episode 103 of the Ignite EdTech Podcast. I'm your host, Craig Kemp, and I'm honoured to have you with us. As most of you know, I continue to work with the incredibly talented Mark Quinn to improve the final audio quality of this podcast. He has his own podcast production studio that provides editing and mastering services to content creators. To connect with Mark, please see the details in the podcast notes below. Last week, I asked you about your favourite EdTech tool, and we had so many incredible responses. Thank you for your thoughts and ideas. This week is inspired by my 8-year-old daughter and Quizalize. Last week, my daughter came home thrilled and excited about something she did at school, and she introduced me to Quizalize, and she was so excited I just had to shake everything up this week and share it with you, particularly around the newly launched Quizalize games, which adds an extra layer of engagement through their 7 epic game overlays. Or so I've learnt. So I wanted to ask you about the games that you play with your class and how it engages them in learning. I'd love to hear from you. Please share with us via our Ignite EdTech social streams. I look forward to hearing your responses soon. After being inspired by my daughter, I couldn't not make Quizalize my tool of the week. The energy she showed me when talking about it reminded me of what tech tools should be doing to add value to learning in our classrooms. Quizalize is the online formative assessment quiz platform that gives teachers superpowers. With over 1 million curriculum-tagged resources available for teachers to use, and the functionality for teachers to create their own in less than a minute, Quizalize makes ongoing formative assessment quick, easy, and fun. In my opinion, the jewel in the Quizalize crown is the mastery dashboard, where student data, including time taken to complete a question, correct and incorrect answers, and which learning objectives have been met or need further work, are fed in real time into the Mastery dashboard. Teachers are able to see immediately who needs what attention, personalise their teaching to every student, and ensure every student can reach their highest attainment possible. Teachers can connect with Google Classroom through Zish, which serves as the dashboard tracking system for student data. Students can play a quick game using the class code or log in with their G Suite for Education account if teachers want to track their progress. Don't think Quizalize is limited to just summative assessments. After investigating, I've seen it used as a pre-assessment tool before a unit to see what students need enrichment in and what need intervention. Then, you could use it as a formative assessment tool to check for understanding and determine how to proceed with instruction in the middle of lessons and units. You can hide student identifiers and share results with the class for instructional purposes. Also, don't forget what we talk about here on the Ignite EdTech podcast every week, is that students can create their own quizzes, create student voice, and they can include a quiz so they can share with their classmates. Several classroom game show websites exist, but what I think sets Quizalize apart is the data. Teachers can see who needs help while students are taking the quiz, and they can see details of how students answered each question. When creating the quiz, teachers can add categories to make sure that data analysis is more efficient and meaningful, and they can add answer explanations to provide students with context. While investigating in more depth with my daughter this week and chatting to the CEO, that's a different story that I'll share soon, I learned about a newly released feature called Quizalize Games. Just when I thought it was at the top of its game, Quizalize threw this at me. Amazing. Quizalize Games are a selection of dynamic and fun game overlays that work in conjunction with all regular Quizalize quizzes. Students work through their quizzes as normal, except now they can be motivated by and enjoy a variety of games layered over top of their usual quizzes. Quizalize Games has launched with a catalogue of 7 flagship games. Battlers, set to a medieval fantasyland backdrop and featuring epic battles between a selection of otherworldly characters. The Adventures of Cleo the Koala, which was my daughter's favourite. Join Captain Cleo and her crew as they voyage through the cosmos to collect the keys of light and restore peace to the universe. The third is Bears. Who loves throwing tomatoes at bears? Well, get answers right and earn tomatoes to throw at your losing opponent. Get them wrong and prepare to be tomatoed. The fourth is Hoops, the ultimate basketball game, and a Quizalize classic. It's back with a vengeance. Now you can choose from more teams and decide once and for all who is the best at hoops. The fifth game, Rocks, a retro arcade game where you need to make sure your classroom spaceship doesn't get lost in the asteroids. A correct answer shoots a rocket and gets your class closer to an epic high score. The sixth is First to the Flag. Teams race to answer questions as quickly as possible to get to the flag, becoming the true First to Flag champion. Simple and effective. And the last is Leaderboard. As students answer questions correctly, they climb to the top of the leaderboard. Each game can accommodate from 2 to 100 players with a selection of team-based games able to accommodate up to 50 teams. Classes of all sizes can enjoy playing Quizalize games, while teachers continue to get the real-time data insights into each student that Quizalize is known and loved for. It's super easy to play the games. You just log into your Quizalize account, create or assign a quiz, and then choose the game that you want to play from the dashboard and simply hit Start Quiz. The chosen game's overlay will display on your screen at the front of the class, while the students complete their quiz assignment as normal on their devices. I highly recommend that you take a look in the description below and continue to listen along for my interview with CEO of Quizalize. You can check out more at Quizalize.com. Last week, we talked about being a startup founder and my journey in starting EduSpark. If you're interested in learning more, go back and listen to last week's episode. This week, I wanted to talk about jumping on ideas and running with them after my interactions with my daughter this week. As I mentioned earlier, my daughter used Quizalize in her class and came home thrilled and excited and wanting to share more. This was exactly the type of interaction that I get excited about and strive for when introducing technology that can enhance learning experiences in classrooms. As a result, I completely hijacked this week's episode to focus on this. One of the things I used to do as a classroom teacher was work to a plan and move through things strategically and well thought out. I overplanned and overthought things. One of the things I've learned is the power and value of spontaneity and running with ideas. I think more educators need to shake up traditional approaches to learning and integration in their classrooms and move into a more inquiry-based environment that's driven by questions, interests, and needs. When a child challenges something or asks questions, we should be encouraging them to investigate, problem solve, and take action. When my daughter shared with passion about her classroom tech experience, I dropped everything and ran with it, as did her teacher. When something grabs attention or gets the desired effect, drop everything else and run with it. Make it happen. Try something new. If it fails, fail forward and try it again or try something different. I love to see this come so organically from her, and this positive engagement in learning is something that needs to be showcased more in this world that we live in. I challenge you to be spontaneous, to try new things, to listen to your students, to use new technology tools, and to find a tech stack that works for you. If you have cool stories like this, please share with me. I'd love to highlight them on the podcast. I hope this inspires you to try new things and integrate new technologies in your classroom to add value to learning and engage students in the experience. To learn more, connect and follow on your social channels of choice. The links are in the description below. Every week, I bring you a short interview with some of my EDU Heroes, an engaging learning experience with someone who makes a difference in education every day, with a particular focus or angle towards educational technology. I had to shift the focus immediately and do a last-minute outreach to Quizalize, moving a previously planned interview to a future date. I wanted to share my story and showcase the tool that inspired my daughter to engage in learning in ways that I'd never seen before. Within 48 hours, I had Charles agreeing to chat and a time set to record. Here is that chat. Today, I have the honor of speaking with Charles Wiles, an experienced and influential leader and founder and CEO of Quizalize. After being inspired by my daughter's love of Quizalize and the new Quizalize games functionality, I reached out very last minute to Charles and the team at Quizalize so I could learn more about exactly what inspires a company like this to build engagements that truly excite learners. Charles, it's a pleasure to have you on the show today. Are you ready to talk about education and technology integration?
Absolutely, yes. Thank you so much for inviting me, Craig. It's a real pleasure to be here.
No, thanks for jumping on, Charles. Let's jump straight into it. Why don't you start by describing your current role and what inspires you to do what you do?
Sure. So I'm a founder and currently the co-CEO at Zish, the force behind Quizalize. I actually spend about 80% of my time writing code these days. And this last 6 months, I spent most of my time working on our new games framework, and I personally implemented the new Battlers game. I spent 42 days straight back in March, to try and get this off the table. So I'm super excited by all the great feedback we've had for that.
Super exciting and, very amazed actually that you still have time to jump in and do all of your code and play around to build this stuff out. You've got a lot of background in education actually. Why did you start Quizalize and Zish?
Yeah, I'm incredibly fortunate in the education opportunities I've had in life. And yeah, I've had a great career. I did a PhD at Oxford in robotics and AI. I was one of Google's first employees in Europe. I mean, I've been incredibly lucky. And I like to think I'm a good technologist. I might not be a great educator, but I'm a good technologist. And so sort of 10 years ago, I got to the point in my career where I said, well, it's time for me to start giving back. I've been very fortunate, but there are millions of children around the world who don't have the same opportunities that I had. How can I do that? And how, in particular, with mobile devices becoming more and more prevalent across the world, how can I use my knowledge and experience to have a transformative impact on all of these children's lives across the world? So that's why I started this company. I mean, it actually started with a very specific experience, actually, which is I was sitting in the office at 4 p.m. in the afternoon in my previous job, and I got a notification on my mobile phone that it was my turn to play a game called Song Pop, a quiz game about music with my daughter. And I just had that instant thought of, wouldn't it be great if instead of playing a game about pop music, we were playing a maths game or a science game or a history game? Wouldn't it be great if that game was diagnosing my daughter or my son's learning gaps? Because my son was really struggling at school. I mean, he needed a lot of help. And wouldn't it be great if it could then recommend to me things I could do with my children to help them progress? And then as I started to think about that idea, I thought, well, teachers have a similar problem, not quite the same problem, but they would love to personalize all the help they give their students, but they just don't have the time. They are so time pressured and they don't have enough time to understand where each student is struggling, let alone work out what the right resource to do it. They try so hard, but it's just such a challenging proposition for them. So could we deliver software where children could play an amazing, fun, gamified quiz in the classroom and the teachers would get that really rich insight that would allow them to instantly personalize the help they give every child? And so that's why I founded Zish.
It's an amazing story, a really cool story as well that really shows the depth and meaning behind why you built something like this. And it all started at home. And, I was personally inspired by my daughter's passion for using Quizalize in her classroom, but I just had to reach out. I'd love to learn more about the new Quizalize games functionality that you talked about earlier on and what inspired you to add this new feature.
We've actually always been pioneers in classroom quiz games. I mean, we actually started about the same time with Kahoot, but we were a lot smaller when we started. And we were actually the first app in the world to launch team-based whole class quiz games with our first flag game and our original version of Hoops nearly 5 years ago. So, we've really done some pioneering stuff, but we decided to focus the last 5 years on how we use that data to help teachers personalize their teaching. Our sort of strapline was, we give teachers the superpowers to personalize their teaching. We spent 5 years doing that. And I think, we excel at that and we have the best product in the world for that. But teachers kept telling us, well, could you add new games? Could you make it more fun for the students? And we never had the resources to do that until this year. So at the beginning of this year, we said, okay, let's see if we can take classroom quiz games, particularly team games, to an entire new level and really bring even more engagement into the classroom. We brought in 4 new games, but we actually envisage a world maybe 10 years from now where there are literally hundreds, if not thousands of games like this for teachers to choose from. We really want to open up the platform to anybody to create these kind of games, easily. So, maybe, Craig, one day you'll decide, actually, I would really like to do this skiing game. Right? We make it easy for you to do that. We've got these 4 great new games to start off with. We've got Hoops, which is our basketball game. We had that 5 years ago. We had to take it down because it was so buggy, but we brought it back now and it's really, really nice. It's class versus computer, but we'll be introducing team versus team soon. Bears is good old bear throwing tomato fun, as I'm sure you all do all the time in reality. But no, one of our designers thought this would be a great game concept, so he's done that. You know, as students answer questions correctly, they win stars for their team. 5 stars, and they get to throw a tomato at the other team. What could be more fun than that? Clear Acquire is a new take on race games. So, you know, we've all seen race games where the student get a question right and they move across the screen, but it's kind of slow and it's not very fun and engaging. So we thought, could we do something new around this? And so we thought, what about if there are 2 teams? You know, you split the class into 2 teams, and the speed of your character is the proportion of questions each team has got right in the last 30 seconds. And that's turned out to be really quite a nice game dynamic. One of the developers on my team has just done some really beautiful graphics. So it's a really kind of beautiful game experience that students seem to love. And then finally, Battlers, which is the one I've personally been working on. That is, you know, when I was a kid, The Hobbit was my favourite book. I mean, I love things like The Lord of the Rings. So I really wanted to try and bring that fantasy into the classroom. And so Battlers is, you know, you split your class, maybe 30 students into maybe 6 teams or 5 students perhaps, or 5 teams of 6 students, or whatever you fancy. And each team gets to choose a fantasy character, an elf, a wizard, an ogre, and whatever they like from our selection. Each question in the quiz is a round in the game, and whichever team gets the most questions right for that round gets to attack the team that got the least questions right that round and hopefully win a crystal, and the team with the most crystals at the end of the game wins. So, you know, 4 completely different, you know, brand new experiences, and we're going to be bringing that even more. We're just really trying to show what is possible.
That's amazing, yeah. How can educators make the most of Quizalize and get the same reactions out of their students as my daughter got in her classroom this week?
Right, that's a fantastic question. I mean, I think great technology can make a big difference, but whatever technology you're using in the classroom, you know, the thing that makes the biggest difference is the teacher. It's always the teacher. And, you know, the games are fun, but when the teacher shows their enthusiasm and, encourages the class, then that is what really makes it special, I think. So ultimately, whatever game you're playing in class, it's up to the teacher to make it fun. And they can do, you know, they can just show that their enthusiasm for the experience. I think there are some very practical things you can do. So our games are a little bit more complex than other games. So I think it's important that the teacher takes the time just to explain the game mechanics and how the game works to the students so that they understand and they recognize that what they're doing is impacting what they're seeing on the screen. I think it's important that the students know which team they're in, right? Because if they don't know which team they're in, then they don't know, again, what, you know, when they're answering their questions, what impact it's having. So there are a couple of little things they want to do just before they start the game to make sure that the students are properly involved.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And as I think about these, I sort of put that into my mind as to what I do at home as a parent, as well as what I used to do in the classroom to engage my learners in that authentic and meaningful learning experience. And I think now more than ever is how do we use technology to embrace that or to bring out students thinking or learning, or how do we add value to an experience? So I love those tips and advice as well. I love what you talked about earlier on around data and the analytics and the back end of Quizalize too, that when I went into it and explored a little bit more this week, I really discovered the power of that dashboard. And I really love that. And I know that data is increasingly powerful and important in the world that we live in. Tell me a little bit more about the data behind Quizalize, the data in this dashboard that can help teachers empower and add value to their learning.
You know, most of these other amazing products don't really focus on how can we give teachers that insight to allow them to instantly personalize the help they give students straight away. So, I mean, yes, you know, like if you use something like Kahoot, you can see which question, you know, your class as a whole is struggling the most and maybe what the big conception across your whole class is. But we wanted to go and say, you know, like, well, you've got able students and less able students, and they're struggling with different things. How can you quickly work out exactly what each student is struggling with and give them exactly the right help? And I think we've made fantastic progress in that and do it better than anybody else in the world, but there's still a long way to go. Our product is far from perfect. One of the first things you need to do is you need to not be giving the teacher the information on which questions students got right or wrong, but map that back to the curriculum or standards. So what we try to do is we talk about mastery data. We don't just tell teachers which questions students got right or wrong. We tell them specifically which part of the curriculum that student is struggling with. We try and estimate the students' mastery of every single learning objective in that curriculum. And so we can instantly tell a teacher at the end of it that, a particular student is struggling with parallel lines, and another particular student is struggling with perpendicular lines, for example. And then we can say, okay, well, great. Give them some follow-up resources, maybe a YouTube video if they're really struggling, or maybe some practice exercises, or maybe if they're actually really mastered, maybe an extension activity. We give them these activities, and then our software measures how effective these activities are, these resources are at helping students progress. And we measure that because once we measure that, we can actually help use that data to tell other teachers what resources work and make recommendations. We can say that actually for a student who's struggling at parallel lines, this YouTube video typically gives a 56% improvement in their understanding of that learning objective. So mapping the data back to specific learning enrichment curriculum. So when you create a quiz in Quizalize, you can tag every single question to a different learning objective in your curriculum. And if we don't support your curriculum already, just get in touch and we'll add it to our database of curriculum so that you can do that.
That curriculum integration piece is critical, I think. I love that you offered that because I think our audience is international and our audience is diverse. And I know that the things that you've shared today, we've totally stumbled upon this conversation thanks to an amazing learning experience by my daughter's teacher using your product so that I can dive in and have this conversation today. So, Charles, thank you so much for your time. It's been amazing. I know that the listeners are going to want to reach out. I know that, we'll put a link in the podcast notes below as well so people can jump in and create that account and check it out for themselves and play around for their classroom. What's the best way for listeners to follow and connect with you?
Yeah, so the best way for them to connect with me is just to email me at charles@zish.com, ZZISH. I absolutely love hearing from teachers. I love getting good feedback. I mean, that makes my day when somebody tells me about the difference it's made to their teaching or to their students. I love even more getting bad feedback. If there's a problem or something you don't like about a product that we can improve, I love that because that's something we can actually do stuff about. So just email me, charles@zish.com. I love to hear feedback.
Charles, thank you so much for your time today. Inspirational.
Thank you so much, Craig. Really appreciate it.
Next week, join me for episode 104 of the Ignite EdTech Podcast, when I am joined by Lisa O'Master. If you enjoyed today's episode, please follow us and share the podcast with your PLN and colleagues. Please remember to spend a few minutes to rate this podcast too on your podcast channel of choice so we can reach even more educators and EdTech enthusiasts globally. Remember, you have the chance to win as well. Check out the links in the description for more, and I'll see you again next week.
If you liked today's episode, please don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss another episode. And be in the drawing to win prizes every week. If you know others that would enjoy the show, please hit that share button and brighten their day. Join us again next week for your weekly EdTech hit with @Mr. Kemp NZ. We'll see you again soon.